So, welcome to another episode of the Pepper Soup Talk Show, where we bring to the table movers and shakers in the African diaspora. As we know, the hair and beauty industry is massive, and we've done a couple of episodes touching upon it. I'm speaking with people who are, whether they're building companies selling products in the industry, building platforms in the industry. But our guest today is actually our first hair and beauty influencer who we're talking to. Her name is Lauren. If I mess up your last name, please correct me. But Busby?
Busby, yeah. Busby.
Lauren Busby. Yeah. She's out of the UK, and this is also our first interview with a guest in the UK too. And so we are excited to hear about her journey, becoming a hair and beauty influencer. She also travels. She also, talks about skincare too. And her experience being in the UK as a member of, the diaspora. And so, let's get into it. But welcome to Pepper Soup Talk, Lauren Busby.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So Lauren, if you can tell us a little bit about your background. I mentioned that you're based in the UK, but I know that you are of a couple of different backgrounds as well. Like you're from, I know, the Caribbean.
So I was born in the Caribbean in the island of St. Martin on the Dutch side. But my maternal side is from St. Kitts and Nevis. And that's where I spent a few of my years growing up as well, before I moved to the UK.
And when did you come to the UK?
I moved to the UK when I was about 12.
Okay.
All right. Just so tell us a little bit about that. Coming to UK, immersing yourself into a different culture. What was that like?
It was definitely a completely different experience. I'd been to the UK quite a lot as a child with my family, because my mum's family, a lot of them, she lived here growing up her whole life pretty much. And so I came here on vacation quite a lot. But it was a whole different ballgame, like actually going to school here, integrating into the culture, learning all the lingo. Like it was completely a culture shock. And I remember being really kind of, my mum says for years I used to ask her, why did we move here? Can we go back now? Years and years, like, can we go back now? Actually, today we're having this whole week we've been having a storm, and today it's been snowing. And I remember the first time it snowed and I had to go to school, and my mum was like, yeah, so are you ready? And I was like, we have to go outside in that. Like, I know I've seen snow before, but I wasn't really aware of the fact that we had to keep functioning as like normal society in such extreme weather. Like, I didn't really think that was a thing. Yeah. So it was definitely a whole load of changes for me as a young kid.
We're based in the U.S. in Philly, and we hear a lot of stories, and we can relate to it too, like moving to the U.S. At a young age. And I imagine it must be a different experience moving to the UK. And so, something I'm very curious about is what that is like growing up in the UK, and we also know that there's a lot of different areas as well. Can you talk a little bit about what part of the UK you grew up in and where you are now?
So I live in Leeds now, which is where I initially moved when I moved to the UK. Leeds is a really big centre for expats or immigrants, as they would say, from St. Kitts and Nevis. So there's a big St. Kitts and Nevis community here in Leeds. It's kind of typical actually in the UK. In Birmingham, there's a lot of Jamaicans. In Leeds, there's loads of Caucasians and divisions. They all have their own little centres where they have developed and grown their own communities. And I think it's been actually quite a good experience for me having come to Leeds, because it had such a connection to my culture. Like Leeds is the oldest West Indian carnival in Europe. And it was actually founded by a division and inspired the start of Notting Hill Carnival, which is the big one that everybody knows that's in London. So there's definitely a massive connection with the Caribbean diaspora here. And you definitely feel it, I think.
Just for context, how far is Nice from London?
It's about 2.5 hours by train, about 250 miles.
250 miles, okay. And so like, being in that area, is it like, if you're over here, we're 2 hours, for example, from New York, is it very like mobile? Like being in Needs, are you typically in that area? Are you often going to London and going to other areas around,
so
or is it kind of insular?
for a while, I used to live in London, and over the last couple of years, especially after COVID, I've been going to London quite a lot by train. It's really easy to make the connection. It's kind of expensive compared to traveling between New York and Philly, but it's easy enough to do. It's just a bit of a long journey. But you do have people who travel for work and things like that. I used to travel for work before I moved to London.
Got it.
Right. So you are definitely one of the major sort of forces in this sort of space of like beauty creations or hair products. And so tell us a little bit about like, you know, how does that journey sort of like started for you?
I think for me, I've always liked like documenting things online. So I used to have a blog when I was in high school, at uni. And then it wasn't till lockdown that it was actually my mum. She wanted to get involved in, I think it was a competition for a US hair brand called Mael Organics. And they're a Black-owned hair brand in the US, and they were looking for ambassadors. They're quite popular here, but not that well distributed. And so we entered this competition and had to create videos. And up until that point, I was more interested in like beauty than hair. So I did it because I was like, my mom wanted to do it, so we did it together. And then, I kind of got into it and really enjoyed doing it, so continued. But I think it's different for everyone. I feel like the natural hair journey in the UK is quite different to the experience in the US. I feel like there's a really big community in the US, whereas here it's not been that kind of consistent.
Can you expand on that a little bit about this natural hair journey and people perception of it, and then why you want to sort of like push the boundary to open people's mind about natural hair?
So I think in the US there was a big surgence of natural hair, especially in like 2010, kind of around that time. Where on YouTube everyone was making videos, making homemade products, teaching each other how to do things. It was a kind of community. I didn't feel like there was that many people doing that in the UK. And actually I didn't really go natural because of that. Like I went natural because I was studying languages at university and I went on a year abroad. So I was kind of concerned about the fact that I was going to have to go to a country where I wasn't completely fluent in the language and potentially have someone put chemicals in my hair. And I was like, this sounds like a bit of a risky situation. Maybe I'll just go for a protective style side. Went fully protective styling throughout my whole year abroad with braids. And then I met an American who's one of my best friends now, actually, when I was living in Salvador de Bahia in Brazil. And she was like, okay, your braids are a bit old now. We need to take those out. So we kind of had a real moment, and we took my braids out together, and I started figuring out what I was going to do with my natural hair. But it wasn't something that I had ever thought about. And it wasn't something that I was really interested in at all, to be honest, before I had done this journey. So going natural in the UK, I didn't feel it was as supported as the community scene in the US. And I think that it's reflective now. There's not as many natural hair brands that exist here or that even are available here. So we get some brands here like Shea Moisture and Mael, but there's not as many, I feel. And it's a bit limited. And I think it's just because I don't believe British Black women are as interested in natural hair as they are in the US.
Can you expand on that? Like what has been your experience noticing how British Black women, what the reception is like in the UK versus the US? Like, what have you noticed with those kind of dynamics?
I mean, I truly believe that everyone should be able to wear their hair however they want. I don't think it's as political a decision to have your hair natural or not. But I just feel like here, just because of the lack of availability of products, it wasn't as easy for some people to go natural. So they were just like, I can't have the look that I want to have. So I'm not going to like put myself through like having a style that I don't really, really like just for the sake of being natural. I definitely think it's grown, but I don't think it's as big. I feel like in America, almost like 75% of women that I saw there are natural, whereas here it's more like half and half.
It's interesting how your environment plays such a huge role too, because like you're saying, being in the UK and maybe some of there's like less almost access to what would make it easier if you wanted to make that transition, or if you wanted to try something different than you're used to. And in your case, you speak about going abroad and how it was, you wanted to kind of play it safe with this more protective style, so you didn't have to kind of go through this hassle with the language barrier. I think it's very interesting when you think about how much your environment plays a role in your decisions sometimes. When we talk about how we've interviewed some people in the hair and beauty industry, and a lot of the times, especially when you're creating a product in particular, in that industry, I've noticed it often comes, at least with our communities, often comes from having to meet a need. Like you had a need, and then maybe you started creating your own hair care product or a skincare product, and then it turned into something more. In your case, it sounded like you really had this joy for documenting, and then that turned into sort of branding yourself as an influencer. Can you talk a little bit about when you made that turn to actually brand yourself as an influencer, like consider yourself travel, hair and beauty influencer? Yeah.
So I actually had plans to do more of like travel blogging, and before the pandemic hit, so I had kind of upgraded my camera to the latest iPhone and all this stuff, and I had all these plans, and then COVID hit. And like I said, so we entered this competition to do hair content, and I was like, I don't really want to do hair content. I kind of find hair boring. I want to do makeup and beauty, but it was almost like the pandemic sort of changed my mindset about it, because I feel like you have to do your hair. It's not something that's like, I can go without makeup on a normal day, but actually sitting in my house, I still need to do my hair. So it was about sharing, okay, what products was I trying? What techniques was I using? I used to get a lot of questions when I used to travel about how I did my hair. So it was like, okay, well, actually, maybe I can create some material that I can share. So when someone says like, oh, how did you get your twist out like that? Or how did you do that wash and go? I can just go, here's this video. So I kind of used it as that kind of opportunity. So we were getting the products from Mael, and it was a paid opportunity. So up until that point, I kind of thought I need a much bigger following to become an influencer. But what I learned was actually content creation isn't necessarily about how many followers you have. It's more about what kind of quality content you can provide and what kind of education you can give and what experience you can share.
I'm glad that you sort of like mentioned that, right? Because sometimes like, we define like success in this sort of, but using the median of like the social media about how many followers you have. But, for us, so for viewers like who are watching you going through this process, right, of like, how to turn your hair into your own definition of your own like beauty. Talk to us about like, what do you always want your viewers to take away by sort of watching your videos?
That's a good question. I think most of the time the content that I make, I wouldn't say that it's like always to do with hair and making people like do a particular style. For me, it's all about like how life is like in reality. So I feel like a lot of influencers especially show natural hair as like, one, it's really easy, or two, it's really difficult. So some people show it as like, it's really easy, and then they show up and they have this fantastic like type 3 flowing wash and go. Or you get the naturals who are like, oh my God, my wash day takes 12 hours. I have to make a DIY product. I have to do this, I have to do that. And they make it sound like a real pain. And I try to sort of go through the middle of that, because I don't think that your natural hair has to take that long, for one. But I do think that more things are possible than people actually believe. So for me, I remember when I first went natural, I only ever used to do twists. And I kind of really believed that I couldn't do a wash and go, which is ironic now because I don't even do twists anymore. I always want my hair in a wash and go. And it was just about changing the products and actually experimenting a bit more. So for me, I think it's about getting people to experiment and try things. And actually, everyone who says, oh, my hair could never do that, I'm like, try it and see. Because I'm not special. Like, what I do with my hair is not like really unique. It's literally just the technique that I use, and anybody can do it. So for me, I think, and with all my content, when I talk about like traveling for carnival or talking about mental health or talking about skincare, it's just like, try it, experiment, see what you like, see what you don't like, and actually just have a go.
Being open, importance of being open.
Right. Right. It's just like, it's what I love about what you shared with us so far is, perception wise, when people look at you, they just see you like, going through multiple like beauty hair products or like going through multiple stages. But I love how you say like, you being a content creator on hair product or beauty, it goes much deeper than that. You're kind of using it as a vehicle. So what are some skill set that has to do with like, hair product or like doing your hair that you see that are applicable to other aspect of any other thing that you do in life?
That's a tough question. I guess I would say that like doing your hair is something that the more you do it, the better you're gonna get. So it's like practice makes perfect. I wouldn't say that the styles that I was doing when I first went natural were amazing, but I thought they were great. I think as you progress through anything, as you get more skilled in anything, you're gonna reach different levels of thinking like how good you are. So when I was first doing twist stats, I thought I was good at them, and then I actually got good at them. And then I was like, it's funny to see and look back at how you progress. But I think that the skill set there is actually just appreciating where you're at in each stage. So it's not about, okay, my hair doesn't look like that person's. My hair looks better than it did yesterday. So that's enough. Like it's just about that little bit of progress. And as you continue making progress, then you'll get to where you want to be eventually. You just have to keep going with it. So I think there's a little bit of resilience, a bit of appreciating where you're at and being present. And I think that's maybe that's a better answer than I thought I was going to come up with.
Yeah, no, so thank you for sharing that. That's actually like very helpful, and I believe it really resonate with a lot of our viewers as well.
For sure.
So it's just like my partner Aki was talking about, like the beauty industry is just so like it's this massive industry, and everyone is sort of like going in there with their own experience and perspective. But there's also this idea of like, especially with the diaspora, the African. It's you watch a lot of documentary about it because you also focus on skin. There's just a lot of this politics and conversation about like brown having a brown skin color or versus like having a lighter skin, or like folks who tend to use certain product to look lighter, or folks who use certain product to even maintain and keep certain tone. But this is also like I noticed in the Caribbean, there's this perception like, if you tend to be more lighter skin, it's a representation of class and status. What's your experience with those type of like, conversation and those view and experience towards like using those different type of product that have a different sort of give you certain type of like pigment? I'm not sure if I'm framing this correctly. But I wanted to hear
good question.
I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I think I'm not really super familiar or haven't experienced directly anything like that in terms of skin color and place in society. I know, of course, that it exists. I studied history, and that's kind of one of the things that I focused on. I did a lot of history about the Caribbean and Brazil and the slave trade. But I would say that it's evident in society everywhere. It's not just about like being Black. I think there's this beauty standard that's unattainable for everyone, and it's made up of someone that doesn't exist. Like this exotic beauty that doesn't exist for white people. It's kind of this like mixed, loose-haired, European skinned, African hipped. Like there's a combination that doesn't really exist in reality. And I'd say that people are all like, even you can see it in when the natural hair community started, like I was saying about like people thinking that the community was hijacked by loose textured hair, but it was also a matter of skin color as well. The ads that you would see, the things that people would find relatable or that brands would think was relatable, and therefore would pick models who looked a certain way. It gives way to a lot of insecurities for people. And I think that it's something that I feel like, having grown up in the Caribbean and then moved to the UK, I don't suffer with as much as people probably did who were born here. So born into a society that was really different from them. I grew up, only one person in my class was white, and she wasn't really white. She was actually mixed race, if you think about it. But we thought she was white. Like, to us, she was the white girl in the class, but she wasn't white. So yeah, I think that background and that growing up has given me a bit more perspective on it. And I'm thankful that I don't feel like my skin color has limited or made me less of anything that I've wanted to be. But I can definitely see how it affects people in the way that in wider society. And I feel like I'm not American, and I'm not in the right place to speak about it. But when you see comments from people like Tandy Newton saying that, like, oh, I was dark skinned for whatever, and she's British, and I'm thinking, you're a really popular actress in Hollywood and you're saying things like that, it kind of gets people's back up.
And when you talk about background, you're talking about growing
I'm not
up.
sure if I answered your question there. We went around.
No, I think you answered it.
No. I really, that was a great response. Honestly, it was. Thank you for, again, for your honesty and being authentic with us.
And when you talk about growing up, you're talking about growing up in the Caribbean and then moving to the UK. As far as schooling and who you're around, you're talking about growing up in the UK. I'm growing up in the Caribbean.
Yeah, so I completed like my primary school education in the Caribbean. So in the Caribbean, in Nevis, where I grew up, we have a British system. So I went to primary school up to the year six, or what you guys would call grade 6, in the Caribbean, and then from 7 to so age of 12 to 18, basically, in the UK. So kind of half and half. And coming to the UK, I guess you'd say, like, there is that definite feeling of like being an outsider, being a Black person in a like mostly white community. But it wasn't really something that I kind of focused on, because growing up in the Caribbean, education is really, really important, right? I left school there, primary school, as the top across the examinations that we had to do for leaving primary school. So when I got to the UK, I was like, okay, I need to be able to do that here. And you kind of do realize that people judge you on things that they haven't really ratified in fact. So I would get put in like the third set. So we used to have sets like the top set, second set, all the way down to like, I think it was 8 groups. So they'd rank you by what they thought you would achieve. And I was put into like the middle of the range for all of the grades. And I was thinking, well, I got the top grades of everyone I knew. So why am I not in the top set? But they just decided that my education couldn't have been as thorough because I wasn't in the UK system, when it turned out that it was actually much better. So you kind of have to fight against that. But I say all that to say that when I came to the UK to go to school, I was focused on school. I wasn't focused on like being found attractive by the kids around me. And it wasn't really something that was like my big insecurity in school. You, as a teenager, you have all these feelings going on, like, okay, yeah, these white boys don't like me, but guess what? I didn't come here for them to like me. I came to go to school. Yeah. So it was kind of not my main focus, but you do definitely notice it.
And you're about your business. She's about her business.
Right. Absolutely.
When it comes to, you touched upon it a little bit already, but your content creation, when it comes to you creating content, can you talk to us a little bit about that process for you? Are you very intentional about what you're putting out? Is it more about where you're going? I think I'm
losing connection a bit. I can't hear you. Can you repeat the question?
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Can you hear me, Lauren?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
I can hear you now, but you're not moving. So yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Now, saying that when it comes to... Can you
repeat the question?
Yeah, when it comes to content creation, can you talk to us a little bit about that process for you? Is it something that you're very intentional about, or with what you put out, or is it more of kind of like go with the flow, based on where you are, and you kind of just express yourself through it? Can you just talk to us a little bit about that content creation? Because we talked about skill sets, right? And Sakulak asked the question about how your journey in the industry has translated to the skill sets in other areas of your life. But then the content creation itself too is a skill set. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I just want to say before you start, like, your content is amazing.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think for me, I would say that I started off with the idea that content had to be really polished, and it was because it's something that I actually wanted to do for a long time before the pandemic, but I never did because I was always like with this perfectionist idea that I didn't have the right equipment or I didn't have the right look or the right setup or whatever. But then it got to a point where I was like, there are people out there like with thousands and thousands of followers doing amazing stuff and then just filming on their phone. And I found myself a really good community who encouraged me to try. And so I started, and I was intentional in the way that I started making videos and I wanted to emulate a certain style. But as I continued, I found that what worked better for me was to actually just make content that was more realistic. I love and I admire the creators who make like really quick transition, like really stylish stuff. But sometimes that's just not like practical. And it's not my style. Like I admire it, but it's not really something that I want to be replicating all the time because it's not really the way that I think of how I want to do stuff. I think it's impressive. But my own style, I think, is a bit more, it's a bit more natural. It's like, this is what I actually look like. This is how long it actually takes me to do stuff. Like I'm quite honest about stuff like that. And I think that authenticity has helped in like building a bit of an audience who appreciate and like have real conversations with me and will share their struggles, and I can like give advice where I can.
Well, when it comes to that content creation, you bring up a good point, because I'm noticing that these social media platforms, especially Instagram, actually rewards content creators who are being more like natural or authentic in their creation or what they're putting out. And that sometimes even when you, because, you know, maybe, I'm sure you try different things, but like when you put out something that is a little less produced or, you know, refined, it often does better than what you maybe spend way more time putting effort into. So it's very interesting to see that. And I don't know if it's just the platform themselves rewarding it, or it was even people just seeing, you know, resonating with things like are just more like organic, you know, versus maybe like, you know, more refined.
But absolutely. And I think like to build onto what Aki was saying, like Lauren too, is I love how like you didn't have any sort of framework. Like you say, it's practice makes perfect. So this is one of those things that you learn as you go. And most of the time, like a lot of the viewers, we sort of think like, oh, I don't have this tool, or I don't have this and that. And so that prevents them from like being able to actually, you know, make the impact they want to make using this media. So thank you for, again, showing our viewers, like, this is one of those things, like, if you're passionate about it, you know, you don't really need to go ahead and wait for the skill set to come to you. You just have to engage yourself with it and just keep putting out content until somebody, like, you know, people are, until like, you know, I'm noticing, your followers continue to grow, and I applaud you to just keep doing what you're doing, because I was actually, in fact, also impressed by what you're putting out there, even though as a Black man or African man, we don't know much about hair.
But you should. I feel like that's something that you should know about.
Can we digress? Can we talk a little bit about that? Talk to us a little bit about the men in UK and they sort of like perception and understanding and reaction to your videos, or they come in contact with the beauty product or the hair product they're doing. What a man takes on that based on your experience?
That's a good question. I don't have that much of a male following. My following is mostly like it's definitely mostly majority female. I think like maybe 70% female. So I'm not too sure, to be honest. I know that for example, I know that my uncle watches my videos sometimes, and he was like, I never realized you did that many things with your hair. I watched that video and you put this product on. He was like, you had like 6 different products. And I was like, I didn't even know that I had 6 products, but it was the fact that he watched the whole video and counted them and told me. I was like, okay, I'm actually doing quite a lot of work here. And I didn't really think about it like that. But yeah, I don't know what their perception is. I know that I would definitely say that men in the UK like natural hair, I think. There's like 2 camps, isn't there? There's like natural hair, or you've got like the the really polished, like, I don't know if you've ever been on TikTok. There's a trend on TikTok that was happening a couple of weeks ago where they were comparing like American girls and UK girls, and they're like, UK girls have got like really like intense contouring and bright under eyes, and like they've got the weaves like super laid, and it was quite funny because I just thought like I'm not anything like that idea of the British girl in comparison, but yeah, you either have natural or not, but I think that you can do whatever you want whenever you want. I feel like if I had the skills to do wigs, then I would try to do one on one day, one on the next day. Like, why limit yourself? But in terms of how men perceive it, I feel like I'm not that bothered about how men perceive it, to be honest. Maybe that's why I never thought about it.
You know,
But what I was going to say before
we
we
really
got onto
truly.
topic.
Right. I mean, you seem to be very grounded and very settled and confident. You heard? Are you able to hear me?
Can you hear us? It's connection.
Yeah. Is it a connection?
Can you hear us?
Sorry, can you say that again? I think I lost you for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is all part of the process because, you know, we having these remote interview, but it's so interesting. Like Akia and I sitting here, like we learning so much from you about like hair and Black women's hair, right? But what do you want like Black men to learn about like natural hair?
I feel like Black men. So let me give it a little bit of an anecdote. So my mum,
men in general, right?
Yeah.
Men in general, yeah. But I want to give a little bit of an anecdote. So my mum always told me that when her family moved to the UK, she was a baby. My grandmother moved away to study as a nurse. My grandfather encouraged her. So he was looking after her and her brother by themselves. And he used to comb her hair. It was quite normal. So I feel like as a minimum, Black men need to know how to take care of their own hair. And once you know how to take care of your own hair, there's no reason why you shouldn't have a bit of an insight into how the women in your life are doing their hair as well. It's not, I don't feel like men's hair is that different. Like I started teaching my cousin who's 18 now how to do his hair more when he started growing it out, because he had always up to that point had a shaved head. He started growing like a high top, and I was like teaching him how to style it with gel, kind of almost the same way I style mine, but his hair is short, kind of like yours is. And I sort of showed him a few different ways, and he was doing twists or whatever. And of course, yeah, it's convenient for him to get his mum or me to do it, but he knows how to do it himself now. And I think it's something that just as much as young Black women should learn to do their own hair and kind of make that connection with taking care of themselves, I think Black men should do the same.
Absolutely.
I definitely feel like there's a space for more to be done when it comes to empowering men to, whether it's take care of their hair or you know,
and learn more
about
yeah.
Absolutely. Because that content, it doesn't seem like it's out there as much. If it is, you know, I haven't seen so much of it. So
I see a little bit of it, but I think that most of the time it gets associated with like, oh, is that guy more effeminate because he has long hair? There's definitely Black male YouTubers who I've seen who have amazing content, and people always contend, is he gay or is he not? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. He looks great. Like, it doesn't really, it's not something that should be restricted by your sexuality, whether you take care of yourself.
yeah.
So something similar, skincare or hair care should be something that you take pride in, whether or not you, basically.
Definitely. We got to ask you, what are where do you see this going? Like your journey as an influencer in this space. Like when you look at where you see yourself a few years from now, what would you like to happen, and what would you like to accomplish in this space?
I think I'd love to continue to grow in the space and the beauty space, because I really enjoy it. Like, it's something that I've always enjoyed, whether I was doing it for myself or now for my followers. I enjoy experimenting with different products and experimenting with makeup, with skincare. So I would like to continue for it to grow, to work with more brands. I would still consider myself a real like baby influencer. I guess you're like micro influencers, what they'd call them, I think under 10K. So I would like to see the growth, which now seems to be a bit of a lottery. If you can go viral, then you can grow really quickly. But I actually don't mind growing slowly. I think growing a community that's engaged and authentic is hopefully the way forward for me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to grow, and I'd like to keep speaking to people and having a real connection with the people that I have as my followers. I don't really like to be like, oh yeah, these are my followers. Like a lot of them have become friends. I've met with people, we've developed relationships, even if we haven't met, we talk all the time. So I think growing is always a great goal for in anything that you're doing to improve, but also just to have more connections, to be able to spread the idea that it doesn't have to be difficult, and to just keep enjoying the process and trying new things across all kinds of content, from travel to beauty, would be my main goal.
You speak about this idea of currently being a micro influencer, and I know that there are a lot of companies who are seeing ways to be able to leverage the talent and the platform of influencers like you. Can you speak a little bit about what that has looked like or will look like when it comes to working with other brands or working with companies or promoting products? Like, have you explored those kinds of opportunities?
Yeah, so I've worked with a few like agencies and stuff that provide products in exchange for a review, and I've done a lot of free content. I think that the opportunities exist a lot more in the US for smaller creators to get paid. I think that's still something that's growing in the UK, and it's a frustration that I've shared with a lot of my peers who create content here in the UK, that there's so many more opportunities for brands influencers to work with brands at a smaller size in the US compared to the UK, especially in natural hair. But it's something that, as I enjoy it, I'll keep doing it and I'll wait for that growth to happen. But it's definitely something you have to keep pushing. So it's negotiating, it's sort of bringing up that base level. So speaking to other influencers, make sure they're not underpricing themselves and not ruining the market for everyone else. It's definitely a process. But, yeah.
For those who are in the industry that may be in the US or maybe in the UK, and then for those of us who are learning more about what the space is like for you, do you know the reason why there is that difference? Is it because of the companies that are in the US versus the UK, or like what?
Yeah,
what is
I think
it?
so. I think the influencer marketing industry is just a bit older in the US, more mature. So it's always existed. I mean, when I think about it, and I had this realization maybe 6 months ago, like influencer marketing through being sent free products. I actually got sent, I remember being sent a pair of shoes when I used to have a blog when I was like at uni. And I hadn't, at that point, I never used to consider myself an influencer. The term influencer didn't exist. So people were sending products out to have like user generated content for a long time, but it's not really something that was as common in the UK, especially with natural hair, because of the lack of brands that are available here. And the brands that are available here are part of big conglomerates like Shea Moisture under Unilever, for example. So their marketing teams are based in the US and they generate almost all of their content from the US. It's only in the last few years that I would say that I've seen a lot of UK influencers being brought in to create content specifically for brands here for a UK audience. And I think that's why. And because it's so new, they're kind of capitalizing on the fact that people don't know any better. They're just making content because they enjoy it, and they're just sending them free products and not paying them. So it's a bit of a battle. You want to grow, so you want to be involved with brands, and you want to have that sort of, not notoriety, but that association that, I've worked with these brands. So you take opportunities, but eventually you have to weigh up, like, is it worth the amount of time that I'm going to invest, especially as I get better at my craft, as I start investing in my tools, I spend more time on my content. I can't afford to take on so many unpaid opportunities because it's just not worth it, and it makes it joyless, and there's not any point in doing it if it's joyless.
And then again, for our knowledge too, hair care versus beauty, skin care, do you see it all as one when it comes to the way you engage in the industry? Or are there kind of clear distinctions with how each space is, rewarded, or, the opportunities that exist?
I think as I've gone more into skincare type content, I realized that it's all the same, but I used to think it was very different. it's actually, for me, it's always the same for every industry that I've worked in. So before I started doing hair, I was like, well, I've only ever done my hair. I'm not qualified to give my opinion about what is appropriate or what people should do or give them advice. I don't really know if it will work for them. But then as I've made content and people have said, oh, this really helped, or I learned this from you, then I've been like, okay, and I felt vindicated and I've continued. And for a long time, I kind of thought, well, I'm not a skincare professional. I can't be like giving people advice. But I feel like a lot of content creation isn't necessarily about giving advice, more about sharing your experience and what you've actually learned yourself through your own personal journey, improving your skin or doing your hair or traveling. And it's not about saying like, I know the most about, I know the most about this topic. It's, This is what I've learned. I don't want you to have to go through everything I went through to learn it. Here's what I know. Take it as it is. And also look at other people's content and see what else you can put together.
Right. And I think what has been so fascinating with someone like you, Lauren, is your ability to take advantage of like the downtown of COVID and to find a way to engage and make your impact based on things that you like to do every day. Yeah. And then also like the diaspora is so vast and the social media and the technology has allowed the diaspora to really like continue to connect. Yeah. And whether you are based in UK, you based in like, back in Africa, in the Caribbean, you start to see like diaspora engagement in the same thing, So what's your takeaway on how we can continue to like bridge this gap and come together as a diaspora to really continue to like share this experience and knowledge?
I think it would be great to see lots of more collaboration between people from different parts of the world, because I think, like you said, there's Black people all across from Australia to the US, the UK, up in Northern Europe, down in South America. And I think it would be great if we could have more collaboration across those geographic zones. I think at the moment you get a lot of like trends passing from one side to the other. A lot of trends start in like South America, especially beauty trends, makeup trends start in like Russia or South America, and they eventually migrate their way up to the US and then across to Europe, or down from Russia across the UK in that way. So I think as the industry grows and people start doing more collaboration, because I think there's so many opportunities for everyone to be successful. I think sharing these opportunities and collaborating is going to be the key to actually having more of a connection between the diaspora and having less of those diaspora wars that people have on Twitter.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a diaspora. You bring up a really great point, that there's definitely, diaspora community in all of these different regions of the world. You mentioned Australia, that's places that people don't, as being here in the US, may not think about as often, parts of Europe, the Netherlands, and Italy, everywhere.
Yeah. And I think the beauty about this is like, we all doing the same thing, like whether you base on like anywhere. But I'm just very fascinated by like how the diasporas are so engaged. Yeah. And Lauren, thank you for being someone that continues to highlight, and be the influencer to really continue to drive like the power of the diaspora. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. I've never been in UK, but just having a conversation with you today just feel like it's just like we all the same. We all sort of like doing the same thing every single day. And I learned a little bit about UK. If I ever end up going to UK, now I know a little bit how to prepare myself for that. So we appreciate you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us.
Yeah, we're starting to close out the interview. We just have a few more questions for you before we close out. So one question I have is for people who are interested in stepping into this journey of becoming a influencer, beauty, hair care, the space that you're in. You mentioned that when you first started, you thought these different maybe subsections were different or were separate, but it's kind of all the same. Based on the experiences that you've had, what would you, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out on that journey? Like what was the best kind of content to focus on, hair versus skincare versus beauty? Like, how would you approach it if you were starting today?
Okay, so if I was starting today, I think my advice to anyone would be just to start with what you enjoy, because at the end of the day, nothing's new. So if you like styling your hair with a toothpick, for example, to do something really obtuse, there's somebody else out there who also likes doing that. And there's always gonna be someone who's interested in your content. So create for yourself, because there's going to be definitely someone who is interested in what you're doing, and just start. Like, the first video you make, you're always going to hate it, and the next one will always be better. So just get started, do something you really enjoy, throw yourself into it. Maybe don't focus on getting paid straight away, because it's not that simple. And if you are targeting, okay, I want to make content because I want to make money, then you're going to be chasing a trend all the time. You're always going to be chasing the money, rather than actually just doing something you really enjoy and then finding a reward in it. And that's not to say that you shouldn't look to get paid, but I think you should make content because you enjoy it first.
Love that. Love that.
Thank you, Lauren.
Lauren, where can people find you if they want to check out the content you create and see the journey that you're on?
So I make content as Miss Busby. That's MIZZBUSBY. And I think I'm Miss Busby everywhere, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, which is not that active at the moment, but maybe that will come back in 2022. And I do have a website as well, missbusby.com.
And this is my last question, Lauren. So what do you say to the little girls out there who might be having a bad hair day, or who are just like not confident about how they look or their hair? What would your advice be to that little girl out there?
I think that they're absolutely beautiful, and it's their appearance is the least interesting thing about you. I think it's one thing that people focus on, and they hyper focus on being beautiful. But I think if you're actually confident in yourself as a person, how you look becomes beautiful. It's one of the, there's a saying, I can't quote it word for word. I think it's by Roald Dahl, and it says, if you're a good person, it shines through your face. And I think that that's really something that people should focus on more.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Lauren, it's been a pleasure having you on our show. Yeah. I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
This is my first podcast, so I was really nervous. So thank you for making me feel comfortable.
Oh no, you were great. You were awesome. You were great.
It's a pleasure for us. Yes, thank you again for tuning into the Pepper Soup Talk Show. We'll be back at you next time.